which is business. So I have been, spoken to offline after the podcast. My business segments are boring, so I've got to spice them up.
Who said that?
No one said that.
Fake news.
But
I'll tell Uncle Tony about it, and he'll take care of these people.
Swinny wanted to cut my segment. I'm like, dude, I live for these segments.
Hey, you're misrepresenting me there.
So I will keep it very tight. So I've now done it differently. I will go through the key outcomes from the financials. So Nintendo's end of year is at the end of March, so their financial year. So they've had their full year disclosures. So I'll just go through like the key outcomes from that. And then instead I will go through some of my insights. So looking at these numbers and then doing some weird shit with the numbers to figure some stuff out. So in terms of the numbers as well, revenue, 16, and this is all US dollars, $16 billion, which is a massive increase.
I'm sorry, 16.6.
Don't interrupt me. 16 billion plus, up over 30% year on year. It is the highest revenue since the Wii and DS era. But the interesting thing is the operating profit, which is the most important thing, so that's after costs have been included, is over $6 billion, which is the highest it's been in the 131-year history of the company. Now, if you do inflation and currency, it's probably a little bit less than the Wii era. People don't want to talk about that. But it is nonetheless amazing, and it's up 80% from last year. Now, a lot of this is driven for the fact that Nintendo, basically being forced to move to more digital sales, and they are massively benefiting from that, given their pricing and just, their cost models and things like that. And they make money on every Switch that they sell. They're just going gangbusters.
Thank you, Animal Crossing, says Nintendo.
Well, and I will touch on the Animal Crossing stuff soon when I get into my crazy insights and analysis. In terms of the Switch itself, it's about 84.5 million Switches cumulative at the end of March, which is insane. In terms of the financial year that we had, so FY21 that was meant to be, it was 28.8 million Switches sold in that year. So just a bit of context with those numbers, that is literally a Switch for every single person that lives in Australia in the course of a year, which is insane. And it's about at the run rate of like a Switch being sold every single second for the whole year, which just kind of puts you into that context of like, that's just amazing. Imagine having a counter on your wall and it's just like every second a Switch is sold. Like you're pretty happy at Nintendo in Kyoto.
So what you're saying, the Switch is the real pandemic.
I would say the Switch benefited from the pandemic a lot.
Oh, really? That's an interesting take.
Those are the real nuggets of insight as part of this podcast.
What I do really enjoy is seeing the forecasts, and it's something that people like treat in a really weird way because they're sort of very suspicious about companies' forecasts, which you always need to be suspicious with financial disclosures because there's a lot of funny games that people can play with them. But fundamentally, they cannot lie in their financial disclosures, which is really critical.
Yeah, no company's ever done that.
They have, and they're like gone to jail. So you definitely don't want to do that. Enron did it. Anyway, so they did actually have Switch sales for FY 2022 being, I think, 26 and a bit million. It's gone down a little bit to 25.
Interesting.
0.5. So they're starting to soften that. So I think that's almost them also factoring in the fact that, vaccines are happening, people are starting to get back to work, all these kind of things. So a bit of the boost that they're probably getting from the pandemic is going to start going away. But even with their own numbers, 25.5 million, that then is putting the Switch at 110 million for the financial year total sales, which then it will become the best-selling home console that Nintendo's ever sold, which is pretty nuts. And it's pretty close to the PS4 total in terms of sales.
It's amazing. And it's still, early-ish in its cycle. Well, not early-ish. It's maybe, halfway, you would say?
Look, so they themselves have said it's about midway right now.
Okay, yep.
Which is critical for my next thing that I wanted
Can
to
we
cover.
let Swinny? Sorry, Swinny was going to
No,
say
I was just going to
something
say, I
first.
think last time we talked about Switch sales and how it tracked against other stuff, I think I predicted that it would actually get there. It would get there. So we'll see. I'm excited to be hopefully right for once about this stuff because it's always integot.
So I don't know. Like I'll see if this works. So I've actually, you guys can check it out. It's called Int Crazy Analysis Sheet. So I actually went
Oh my
through
God.
all this analysis. So I want to focus more on insights. With my little business segment. So I've actually, and when you see CUM, that's cumulative. Like that's just pretty normal in like business spreadsheets, but probably doesn't look so good on a podcast. What I did here is, so I looked at the PS4 and the Wii because they're probably the most relevant big consoles that we have good data for. And they also have an interesting thing where the PS4 is very solid and kept selling well into the generation. The Wii fell off a cliff. And you can see that these have all been normalized to the times that they actually were sold. And the other thing that you probably have to recognize here is that I've broken it quarter by quarter, right? And the reason you do that is because there's a lot of seasonality in data when it comes to video game sales. So if I look at the cells here in G9 to G12, sorry, you can actually see that over the whole year, you get 43% of your year's sales in the Christmas period, like that one quarter. Whereas January to March is very, very soft, right? Now, the reason why I said about the Animal Crossing thing before is I was looking through the Switch data and I couldn't understand why this period in 2020, like the numbers were crazy for the Switch when I was working it out. And then I realized, oh, wait, that was when Animal Crossing was released. Like that 1 week actually had a huge bump up in their sales. And I was like, oh, I can't really explain it. And I'm like, oh, that's why. It's because of the Switch. So what I've done here is I had to also adjust the analysis because the Switch came out in March, whereas the Wii and most consoles and the PS4 came out in the Christmas quarter, which was like November, that kind of period. So I have to then adjust based on the seasonality. And what I've said here is there's three kind of like paces that the Switch is selling at, right? And the third is my view on how many the Switch will sell, right? So if the Switch continues on at the PS4 pace, so what it's sold right now, and then it will grow to what the PS4 has sold. What I'm saying is that, the other thing I should just call out is I've used the forecasted numbers that Nintendo's gave, like the 25 mil sales, because I think that's really critical because that's their disclosure. So I've used that and then built from there. So what I'm saying is, yes, they'll sell 25, but the year after they'll sell 10 million, then 8.2, and then it will trail off at the rate that the PS4 is trailing off.
Does that include the Pro?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd say that's a whole generation. That's giving us 130 mil total sales. 130 mil, where does that place us? That places us as the number one Nintendo console by a country mile, above the Game Boy Color, and again below the PS2 and DS. Now, PS2, I feel like we don't actually have very good data on the PS2, like real data on it. Like we have very top headline numbers that Sony has given. There's a couple of weird factors with the PS2. We don't know how many people, but there's people that just bought the PS2 to use it as a DVD player and never actually put a game in it. Now, I don't know, you can't just discount that, but from an analysis point of view, I would discount that. I would, if I was trying to compare it to the PS2, because I'm trying to compare apples to apples, so it's like a game console to a game console, not a DVD player.
I don't know. My last PS2, which was like whatever 3rd generation, 4th generation, because I kept revising them, was solely used for DVDs. Never played a game on it.
That's what I'm saying.
But that's rare. Oh, is it rare?
No, it's definitely not rare, because I think if my parents were going to buy a PS2, just use it as DVD player. So, I think you have to, discount that number by at least a haircut of 10%, let's just say. And that actually starts to put it in the realm of like being competitive to it. And same with the DS as well. Now, Wii. So what happened with the Wii is it sold gangbusters like the Switch. It's kind of a similar pace actually, but it just went off a cliff. like completely went off a cliff. So what I said here is I'm accepting Nintendo saying they still believe they're going to sell 25 million next year, but then you can see the numbers dropping off dramatically, like based on the Wii's results. Even saying that, it still sells 117 million. So this is the worst case scenario, basically, that the the Switch is going to sell 117 million, which would put it below the Game Boy. And we know now 115, 116 million of the PS4, that will still sell. Like, it still sold 1 million in the last quarter that it reported. I'd probably say the PS4 will outsell the Switch if it goes down the Wii track. Now, I think it's very unlikely it's going to do that. Now, what do I think the Switch will sell? So what I did here is, and this is pretty simple, but essentially Nintendo themselves are saying that they are sort of mid-gen. I think that they will see the type of numbers that they'll see from a PS4. So these are still mostly basing on the PS4. But looking at the timeline, I actually think it's off by a year, the growth and the decline of the Switch. So if you go through, it's probably like 2024, 2023, where we'll see the successor to the Switch. And we'll touch on that in a second. So I'm expecting it to see the numbers of a PS4, but delayed by a year, given the place in its generation and when the next Switch will come, or the next successor will come out. And if that offset by a year occurs, then the kind of sales you'll still see stronger sales in the financial year of 2023, and then starting to decline 2024 onwards when the next successor comes out. And that would then result in 140 million Switches sold, which is phenomenal. Like, we're talking about when the iPhone came out and exploded, people thought that consoles were going to die. And then you have a console now that's, I think, going to sell 140 million. So that's my prediction for the Switch, 140 million. That's my little segment on the Switch itself. And trying to keep it different.
Did not understand any of that at this stage. I'm a little too afraid to ask.
I love you calling it a little segment. That's
the little
that's
segment,
brash.
the little complicated segment. Hey, you did not go into column P.
What was column P?
The cum FY.
Yeah, the cumulative financial year sales. Yes.
That's what that meant. Okay.
And the last thing I wanted to say,
the whole analysis makes so much more sense to me. Thank you.
The last thing I wanted to say was they had a record spend in R&D. And they were actually asked this question by an investment analyst, and they said they're investing in online, but mostly, given that they're mid-cycle, they are investing in the successor platform to the Switch. Now, I wouldn't take that as at all being the Switch Pro. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So they've already confirmed that they're looking past the Switch.
It's the Switch U.
As they do.
That's the successor.
Oh, God. Let's all hope not. All right, let's get into our final segment.